Bring you back in. Hey, everybody. We are ready to rumble. Education Thursday. Live. Let's do it. So this week, there is a lot going on. Lot going on. There are a few schools starting to come back out of virtual into the hybrid or live. SATs are cranking again. ACTs are cranking again. School is kind of, sort of, maybe a little bit coming back to normal. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But really, tonight's about my special guest, who I'm super psyched to have on. I'm going to introduce in a second. I just want to talk about two things very quickly. As I mentioned, schools are we've been in school 6-8 weeks now. And it's either, I'm talking to parents every day. Some are all excited, some are complaining. And I think where it's at now is kind of stabilized. And I'm not saying that necessarily in a good or bad way, just as in reality. I think you're getting what you're going to be getting. So as always, this show is sponsored by the support community. If you need help, littlest, tiniest question possible, enormous question, reach out, because I have lots of means to help you. Very simple, meet you at your level, and we will roll from there. The support community is makethegrade.community. Yeah. Second thing for now is that we are continuing these lives every week. Got guests lined up into January. January, can you believe it? Yeah. It's a couple weeks. Thanksgiving, we're not doing it. Christmas week, but I got already guests into there. This is covering a huge spectrum of all different things that are here to help parents, help students, to maximize their educational experience. Some of them directly academic. Some of them, like tonight, are a little bit tangential, but super valuable. So without any further ado, I want to bring my guest tonight. I'm really excited to have her on. Carlee Myers, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
There? Hang on, I'm not hearing you,
here.
Carlee. There you go. Say something.
How about now?
Nah, yes. Maybe on my end. I don't know. I get all when these first come on live, I get all excited. By the way, if you're watching at home or wherever, in your car, on your tablet, whatever you're doing, and you want to comment, ask me a question, ask Carlee a question, just write a comment. We'll see it here. Like, for example, hello, Ron. Welcome. Ron, one of my sponsors in the month of September. Check out his thing at Education by Entertainment. But you have your 15 minutes of fame right here. Anyway, let me just do a quick little bio on Carlee, and I'm going to let her take it away. But Carlee Myers has a business called Stressless, stressless.com. And her basic goal, she's an expert at helping female leaders, executives, business owners, managers, and in my case, I think parents who are feeling overloaded, overworked and exhausted, find peace, find some freedom, and that they desire. She's the founder of a company called the Stressless Company. I love that name, Stressless. She helps hundreds of professionals around the world take action and reduce stress. So very, very impressive resume and pedigree there. And how are you? How you doing this beautiful Thursday night?
I'm doing great. It's my Friday night. I'm going to be taking off tomorrow, getting a little nature time in. So
good for you. TGIT. Are you going hiking or something? A fresh air kind of thing?
Yep. I'm going up to New Hampshire for a little time, surrounded by lots of trees and a camp in a tent. So
good. Well, that actually sounds really nice to me. I would bring a heavy duty coat. It's probably a little chilly up there. But hey, look, there's something to be said for reconnecting, right? To the basics, getting back to the land, set your soul free, that kind of thing. Good for you. Good for you. And I know it's well deserved. But before you leave, let's talk about what you do. So can you just encapsulate maybe your mission statement or your goal, or what your core service would be for the parents and everybody out there who's listening right now? What do you basically offer?
Yeah. So what we really focus on is we help leaders who are feeling overworked and exhausted, who are, first of all, let me define leaders here in this scenario. We typically work with executives, we work with managers, we work with business owners, people who have got a lot of stuff going on, including those professionals who have got kids And they're feeling overworked and exhausted. And we really help them find the peace and the freedom that they desire. And as a result of our work together, what they learn is not only how to deepen their spiritual connection, and we might talk about what that has to do with stress later this
Mm-hmm.
evening, but they also learn those tactical tools so that they can experience more free time, more efficiency, and even more prosperity. And I see Ronald says hello, so nice to see you too.
Is look, we live in a world where everybody wants a quick fix, right?
Mm-hmm.
Get a headache, you take an aspirin or whatever. You get I don't know, whatever. You work out, you're a little bit sore, you put some cream on it. Is there, does that blend with what you can do? Is this more deep rooted? I don't think this is something somebody can come to you and in 5 minutes all of a sudden, have some panacea that fixes everything. But take us through the process a little bit. So somebody presents to you and they're saying, I'm stressed. I'm just the weight of the world's on my shoulders. And where do you go from there?
Yeah, so it really, it depends on the individual, but I would say that if we are in fight, flight, or freeze, where we are just freaking out, we feel like we're in a corner, we don't know how to handle the situation, right? Like we're in that space. The first thing that I would recommend is that we implement some creative stress reduction. And creative stress reduction, for those of you who don't know what it is a term that I've coined that means any activity. It is any activity that gets us out of fight, flight, or freeze mode and gets us into this state of play or flow, aka rest and digest. And so this activity can be anything. So it can be going on a walk, playing with your dog, painting. It could be baking a pie. It really could be formatting an Excel spreadsheet. It really
So,
doesn't
so it
matter
doesn't
what it
have to be
is.
sitting on top of a mountain in a lotus position, saying a mantra for whatever.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay.
And the point of this being that when we're in fight, flight, or freeze mode, we have a tendency to make pretty poor decisions. So we act rashly. We make poor decisions. And so the first step, if we're in that state of mind, is to do a little bit of creative stress reduction so that we can get ourselves out of that mode so that we can start thinking clearer and we can think more strategically. Now, beyond that, I actually have a 7-step system, unique methodology called the stressless method that I bring my clients through if they're experiencing stress. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we're experiencing stress every single moment of every single day.
Mm-hmm.
But it could also mean we're experiencing stress in every single moment and every single day. We're feeling overworked, overwhelmed, exhausted. We're maybe even feeling burnt out. And so we go through that 7-step methodology where we're ending on the other side of that. We're finding true emotional freedom, which is beautiful.
There's so many levels we could get into this on. Let me start here. Because a lot of my audience typically are parents. They have kids in school, which in and of itself, by definition, carries some level of stress, right?
Mm-hmm.
The kid's not doing what they're supposed to do. They're arguing about homework. They got a bad grade. It's always somebody else's fault. Blah, 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 blah. But is there anything in particular, and your advice is sound, is there anything in particular you might be able to tell parents that maybe is a little bit unique in their own situation as opposed to, say, a business executive
Mm-hmm.
or a person in a corporate leadership type position?
Yeah.
Because there's so many layers as a parent. You can argue about school, of course, but then you have to clean your room. You gotta eat your lima beans. But so there's a lot of baggage sometimes that comes with this stuff. But is there something you could just right off the bat say to parents that might, some sagacious advice here?
Yes. So it's funny. I thought that I had patience until my sister had twins and I decided to take care of them for a week. Thought I had patience. No.
Yes.
So
Let's give you, here you go.
although,
Taking care of your sister's twins for a week. That's
thank you. Yeah, you'd get one to sleep and then the next one would wake the other one up. But I would say that there is so much as parents that is outside of our control, right? And there's so much, I think this is in general, but I think most, really specifically with parents, you can't always predict how your teenager or your kid is going to react. You don't know what's going to, send them down a spiral. You don't know what's going to stress them out. You don't know even how, like, there's so much when it comes to having another person in your life. There's a level of unpredictability. Mm-hmm. And so relating this back to the stressless method, the first thing that I would recommend to parents who feel like their life is out of control, like whether it's the way the kids are, whether their kids are struggling right now and they're acting out or shutting down, or whether they're just like, what is going on with e-learning, what's going on with going back to school, somebody make up their freaking mind already, right? Like there's so much that's outside of our control. So that I would start with step one in my methodology, which is to deepen our spiritual understanding. Now, this
to kind of go inside, so to speak.
Yeah. And so like when I say the word spirituality, what I really mean is the undefined thing that gets us from a place of struggle and suffering to that beautiful state of mind, that peace, that freedom, ease, whatever. And so deepening our spiritual understanding is about starting to create a definition or an understanding of what spirituality means to us as individuals. And the reason that this is so important is because, like I was saying earlier, there's so many things that are completely outside of our control. And a lot of us, we have the tendency to, when we're experiencing those things that are outside of our control, we have that fight, flight, or freeze response. We start to freak out. Things can't be this way. And then we try to control the uncontrollable, which leads to even more stress. And so we have the stuff that's outside of our control. And then we also have the stuff that's inside, within our control that we can actually do something about. But oftentimes when we get in such a stressed state, we end up neglecting the things that we actually have control over to worry and focus on the things that we can never change. And so this first step is incredibly important, especially to parents, because there is so much that is outside of our control right now. Mm-hmm. And we need to have the ability to start to hand off those things so that we can shift our energy from something that we can't change to focus on the things that we can and start making those changes. I just did, this is kind of going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but I just did a Facebook Live training earlier this week on Monday about this same concept and how it applied to the elections. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to go into who to vote for and all that.
We don't have enough time for that. At least not tonight.
Right. But it's really it's very similar because we don't know what this person's going to do if they get elected or if they get reelected, blah, blah, blah. But we get so worried about the big picture that we fail to realize that the stuff that is within our control, like researching and like doing our research on who to vote for, like perhaps we could be a poll worker, like perhaps we could be really reaching out to our local officials or, whatever those things are. But we get so caught up in the things that are outside of our control that we don't even think about what we could really change.
So here's the question. Here's the question for you. And I want to get into your personal story because it's super compelling.
Sure.
If you're okay with that. Is it the stress itself as a stimulus, or is it how we cope with the stress? Or is it both? I know I don't know if it's possible to completely separate because it's impossible to live in a stressless world. I mean, it's just, if you're alive, you have some level of stress, right?
Yeah.
Everybody has. Cavemen had stress. They had to find the next bison or next woolly mammoth, right? So there's never going to be zero stress. That's not reality. And only people with zero stress are people underground. I mean,
there's a reason my company is called the stress less.
It's not zero.
Company.
It's not stress none.
Yeah.
It's not stressnone.com. Stress right. Right. So we understand that. But so is it the stressors, the stimuli? Or is it how individuals cope with it? Or is it the combination? What's your view on that?
I would say it's not so black and white, but it is very much so. I can definitely argue for the fact or for the viewpoint in which it is the way in which we respond to the stressor. Because every single one of us watching this training tonight, watching this live tonight, could experience the same exact stressor and have a completely different response. And something might happen, and I would be like, okay, whatever, no big deal. And Ron, who's joining us right now, maybe it's a big deal to him, and it sends him in a spiral. So it depends on the person. It depends on our background. It depends on a lot of other things. But it really, what I would say is, it boils down to how we view the stressor, which is it considered distress, or is it for us considered eustress?
Yes,
So
EU stress.
EU stress, like euphoric stress, right? So typically eustress is associated with, things that are stressful but are good. So we would think things like getting married, having kids, getting the promotion, getting that, going to college, all of these things.
Hosting a Thursday Night Live.
Right? All
This
these
isn't
good
stress
things.
free,
Yeah.
right? Being a guest, I
Yeah.
mean, it's a lot of pressure on you to give a lot of brilliance here. So, well, you're handling it very well.
Thank you. Thank you. But, all of these things we typically view as good.
Mm-hmm.
Very easy, right? Having a baby is stressful. Getting a promotion, stressful. Getting married, stressful. Going to college, stressful. But we're so excited about it, for most of us. We're so excited about it that we don't even care. It doesn't even matter. And so it's really what I want to talk about tonight is this shift. It doesn't have to just be the good stuff. It can also be the other things that are going on in our life. If there's a tough situation, do you view it as a growth opportunity? Or do you view it as something that's going to put you in harm's way? That's going to screw you over, basically.
Speaking of growth opportunity, can we talk about your story? Because I know what it is, at least most of it or some of it, and it's really compelling, but it's also very personal. And I know a little bit of the reason why you're doing what you're doing, so I'm going to ask you to share that, because it's a really powerful journey, right?
Yeah.
And I think what I've taken from it, and I've heard this before, is everything is a process, right? We're here, then we're here, then we're here, and it's not a quantum change. You kind of grind through it, and you change. It's everything's kind of a gradual. Then you can look back and see a big change, which actually is a lot with what I see academically with kids. Nobody goes from an F to an A. There's a build up. So let's go back, I guess to where everything started for you in terms of the stress coping, and if you want to share your story here, I think it would be interesting. So let's talk about this. So how this is kind of how you got into the stressless world, right? So let's hear it.
Yeah. So this is definitely a very personal story, but it is the reason that I do the work that I do today. And when I was about 12 years old, actually, a man was murdered in my home, and my mom was shot 3 times. And, around that time in my life, things weren't working out between my parents. And so they separated, and my mom started dating again, and she ended up dating a bad apple. And we realized it a little bit into their relationship. And so she broke it off. And then she moved on, right? As we do when we go through breakups, separations, divorces. She started dating again. And the problem is that ex-boyfriend never stopped paying attention. And a few weeks later, he ended up breaking into my childhood home, killing my mom's new boyfriend, and trying to kill my mom. And my mom, this guy literally shot my mom point blank in the back of her head, through her L5, in her spine, and through her arm. She was not supposed to survive. The doctor said she had a 3% chance of living. And if basically she ended up making a full recovery. If you saw her today, you would have absolutely no idea. All she has is a pair of reading glasses and a slight limp. That's it. But while my mom basically made a full recovery, I really struggled for a long time. I struggled with the symptoms of PTSD, with stress, with overwhelm, with jumpiness, with night terrors. I mean, you name it, I was probably struggling with it. And it took me a really long time, first of all, to get the courage to tell anybody that I was struggling. And when I finally did, I would say things to people like, "Hey, I'm kind of struggling right now, or I'm feeling a little stressed, or I'm feeling kind of overwhelmed." And I would ask people for advice. And it was like clockwork. I got the same, 5 or so responses every single time. "Hey, Carlee, have you tried therapy? Have you tried meditation, yoga, exercise? Have you changed your diet?" And for me, I was like, "Are you kidding me? Like, who do you think I am? Do you think I live under a rock? Like, what? Come on, give me a break." And the reality is I was so desperate for change that I had tried all of that. And I have to be honest with your listeners, Steve, that, some of the stuff, it didn't work at all. And some of it worked a little bit, but nothing ever got me over that hump where I was experiencing things like, happiness and joy and silliness and goofiness and even just a sense of contentment, those beautiful states of mind. And as a result of continually showing up and doing things that I knew weren't working for me, I ended up struggling for 10 years. 10 years. Until I finally found the thing that worked for me. And by the way, that thing that got me out of all of this was creative stress reduction. That was the first step in my journey. We already talked about that a little bit earlier. And then I have to be honest again that, I spent a few years being a little angry. Because I was like, why isn't anybody talking about this? What, like, really? We've got these 5 or so mainstream approaches that we're recommending to everybody, like it's a magic, like they're magic pills. And I realized that there's no one size fits all. There never was. And when I got done, throwing my temper tantrum, I had this kind of aha where I was like, oh crap. Like, I'm supposed to be the one that's talking about this. And so, that's where the Stressless company was born, helping people see that if you feel like you've tried everything, you probably haven't. And I do want to just take a moment, Steve, tonight and just share if there are any teenagers listening that are struggling, to know that even if you reach out, first of all, reach out if you need help. If you're struggling with something, reach out.
I mean, you're not talking stress. You're talking like
stress. I'm talking stress. I'm talking trauma. I'm talking anything that you're going through. Reach out. Don't hold it in like I did for 5 to 7 years. Don't do it. And if you don't get the response that you're looking for, reach out again, and reach out again, and reach out again.
Now, I don't want in any way, shape, or form diminish your experience, because that's heavy duty. But it is someone who has like more like a day-to-day, like, oh, I got a test next week and I got 3 tests in the paper, I'm stressed out about that. They're using the same word. They may not be using it in the exact same context, but I know you're not going to be able to talk about your entire program in the next 10 minutes or 15 minutes, but what would be a simple exercise? And there's a lot of classic things, to take deep breaths, count to 10. But is there just some kind of simple exercise, I'm going to use that word, that you could share with people just to kind of put the brakes on it a little bit, like maybe, or something like that? Is there like a first thing that you might suggest doing? I know it's not going to cure. Maybe cure is even the wrong word to use, right? You probably didn't use cure in this thing. It's cope. But, what's kind of just a quick thing people could do?
So I would definitely return to creative stress reduction. And what you would do in order to find what works for you is you would start by making a list of at least 50 to 100 activities that you love doing. And then kind of narrowing it down from there. What is let's make sure it's not harmful to ourselves or to others. Let's make sure if we've experienced trauma, that it doesn't trigger us. Let's make sure that it fits into our time and our financial resources. And let's also make sure that if we did it every single time, if every single
So it
time
could
we're
be as simple as
stressed,
just
that
taking a walk around the block.
yes, exactly. So when you're making that list, you're going to narrow it down to the things that are healthy and accessible for you. And that, I've had clients where, they're taking a test and they're getting nervous, and their creative stress reduction is, something that just brings them a sense of calm, is rubbing their hands on their thighs, right? It gives them a sense of groundedness. It gives them a sense of calm. I've had other clients where it's, drawing the infinity symbol on their hand, because that can be a really grounding activity. It can, we've all heard about breath work. We've, just focusing on our breath. One little tip that I would give around, using the breath to manage stress is that your body actually creates hormones and releases different chemicals when you exhale longer than you inhale. So it's not about just taking deep breaths. In fact, that's probably going to get you more worked up. It's actually about making your exhale longer so that your brain is triggered to release those hormones and those chemicals that create that rest and digest response.
It's like
So
a
those are a
yoga
few.
breath.
Yeah. So those are a few, but again, I always hesitate to give specific advice because each and every one of us are unique. So always start with a list of activities that you love doing that make you feel good. Narrow it down to the items that are healthy and accessible for you, and take it from there. Start exploring.
How do you feel about, I have a background in psychology, and there's a school of therapy, and I'm blanking on the exact name, and it doesn't matter. Where at some point the patient has to confront their demons. Not using the clinical terms. It's not it. What you're talking about is kind of a coping and adaptive sort of therapy.
It's
Side
not
of it, right?
dealing with it.
Right.
Is
So you're not
absolutely
really
not.
asking somebody to say, hey, you got stressed out because of something, and we got to go hit that head on, so you don't have that stimulation anymore. Is that something that you think is important? Like I'm going to use an example.
Yeah.
I have kids. I can work with them, virtually in an office, whatever. I know they know their material. I know they know the information. They go into a test. They get out of their their comfort zone, and they don't perform as well. Commonly called test anxiety. And there's 100 things people say to get around that. But that's just kind of a lower level thing. That's not going to put somebody into suicidal mode. Hopefully, at least. What's the simplest way to get somebody to self-monitor this, or is there one?
Yeah. So what we've talked about so far is simply a tool to get out of fight, flight, or freeze mode. And if you find yourself in a situation where you have to perform in the moment, those are great tools to just get yourself back in the game as soon as possible. But when the real work, and this is the reason why clients work with me, is that they want to figure out what's really deeply causing, not just putting a Band-Aid on the problem, but preventing the stress, the unnecessary stress. And so an example like, getting testing anxiety, there's likely, the test is the stressor, live testing is the stressor, but that's quite frankly, in my work, I found it's never actually the real block, the real thing that's causing the anxiety and causing the stress response. That's exactly why, step 2 in my methodology is to identify the blocks, because if we don't know what's causing, for instance, that testing anxiety, we don't know what to do about it. And so we're stuck in the cycle of, testing anxiety, creative stress reduction, anxiety, creative stress reduction, and you're just, anxiety meditation, whatever. You're just in that cycle of constantly trying to soothe yourself instead of get to the root. So what I would recommend is, we actually have at the Stressless company a system that we take all of our clients through to figure out what's really at the root. But I'll give you an example just for the sake of this argument. So let's say we have a student who has high levels of test anxiety. They completely blank when they sit down. They're 3 questions in, a challenge comes up, that's when things go awry. There's likely, we start with identifying, okay, why are they feeling this way? Why am I feeling this way? There's probably a story that maybe it's I'm not smart enough, maybe I didn't study hard enough, this always happens to me, this is just my anxiety, whatever the story is.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go a step further and we say, okay, what's the feeling? Now, in this case, it's pretty easy because the feeling was part of the scenario. We're feeling anxious. We might also feel like a sense of despair because we don't know how we're going to remember all the answers for this test. And then we take it a step further and we ask ourselves, and this is a really important question. Which of my basic needs are being threatened here? So if we think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs,
the Maslow's, right. Mm-hmm.
At the bottom, we have physiological, food, water, shelter, clean air, that kind of stuff. Then we have safety needs. Then we have love and belonging. Then we have self-esteem. And at the very top, we have self-actualization. Exactly. Mm-hmm. We ask ourselves which of these needs are being threatened, not necessarily not being met, but being threatened by this. And so if we have, for instance, a student that has parents that don't accept anything less than a B, that could be a basic love and belonging need that's being threatened by this test. It could also be, depending on the severity of their home life, it could be a shelter thing, right? I'm going to have to avoid my house for the rest of this week because I don't want to have this conversation. And so if we identify the basic needs that are being threatened for this student, we realize it really has nothing to do with the test and forgetting the answer, and it has everything to do with what the parent thinks or what the student is assuming, the story that they're telling. They're assuming is going to happen if they, quote unquote, fail or don't get that A.
And it may not ever happen, but because they believe it could happen, it's enough of a trigger to start the whole cycle.
Yes. And believe it or not, we're not even the whole way at the root here. We're only, 3/4 down.
Yeah, so we got a very big onion here. we haven't really peeled it back. Mm-hmm. Carlee, listen, I find this really, really interesting. And I know it's a very individual thing, right? I mean, people could be listening to this and saying, I get it. I just don't know what to do. Or I get it. Now I know what to do. This is Steve Green, my guest, Carlee Myers, Education Live Thursday. We're here every single week talking education, but really talking about ways parents, students, people can help themselves in the classroom, out of the classroom, maximize your education. That's my thing. But I love having experts on that can just bring so much value with this. I mean, I'm not even joking. We could talk about this for weeks. But we only have about 10 more minutes. Is there anything you're doing, like anything you want to plug? Like, do you have an event or a workshop or anything that you may be able to offer anybody in the community here?
Absolutely. So I will start by saying, if you're a parent and you feel like you could use some support, you're feeling overworked, you're feeling overextended, what I'd love to do is offer you an invitation to chat one-on-one with me. And so, what will happen there is we'll sit down for a phone call and we'll look at, what's causing you to feel overworked, what's causing the exhaustion, what's causing the stress. And I will listen deeply and I will hold space for you. And then together we will get to the root of why you haven't found that peace and that freedom yet. And yet is the key word here. And so in order to grab that opportunity, what you're going to do is you're going to visit stresslessco.com/apply. And you're going to fill out that application. Make sure you mention Dr. Stephen Green in that application, where you came from, make the grade. And a member of my team will be in touch with you within the next 48 business hours, should it be a good fit for us to talk, for me to be able to support you. So that's definitely one place where you could go. I also run a self-care in action group. It's a self-care accountability group that is completely free. that meets bi-weekly on Tuesdays at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. And so if you're interested in checking that out, you're like, you know what, I need to start taking care of myself. I need to implement the creative stress reduction that we were talking about earlier. Then you're going to visit stresslessco.com/self-care. And all you need to do is enter your name and email, and you'll get the reminders and the links and everything for that.
Let me ask you this, because I've asked a lot of my recent guests this. We're in a stressful time. I don't think anybody's going to heavily debate that. I'm not sure when it's going to end. I don't know what the normal is going to be, whenever that is. I'm trying to stay positive. So is there anything positive you think will long-term come out of this? What I usually, like if somebody asks me that question, I say, I think the acceptance of virtual education is way, way up. I've been doing virtual teaching for 10 years now. And sometimes you have to convince people, hey, you can learn this way. Trust me, you really can. And I think people now that have experienced, it's not perfect, and it's not perfect for everyone. But generally, when done properly and done with conviction, people can definitely learn. And I look at that as a positive because it opens up education to a lot more people. That's the positive to me. But is there anything in your world, in your profession or personally maybe that, you feel is going to be a positive kind of coming out of the negative, as it were?
Yeah. So I had a friend back in, I think it was March or April. We were on a Zoom call and she shared, it's really funny. I feel like the world is in a forced, like a global forced, like yoga or meditation retreat. Like not all of us want to be here, but we are.
Yeah,
And we're
really.
being forced to reflect, right? And so
I was thinking
I
of
thought,
more like a boot camp, but like
yeah.
basic training.
But I really loved that example because what I've seen over the last 8 months, and I cannot believe it's been 8 months, but here we are, is that we have been forced, many of us, not, I wouldn't say all of us, but many of us have been forced to see that something hasn't been quite right. It has nothing to do with the pandemic, but we've slowed down enough to say something's not right. I'm not feeling quite right. I'm feeling stressed more so than maybe normal.
Or you're examining their priorities.
And yeah, they're saying, wait a second, why was I wasting so much time doing X, Y, and Z, right?
Right.
And it's been an opportunity, and I'm seeing it already, an opportunity to heal past wounds, to address chronic stress, to spend more time with family, to have more fun, to get out and, just really reprioritize happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's going to be a huge takeaway from this whole experience.
I completely agree with you about the kind of the reshuffling of what's really, really important. And it's not completely wiping things out that everybody always thought were important, but yeah, it's interesting. I was talking to somebody, a teacher, a friend of mine, when this all hit in March, middle March, everybody's a couple weeks, a month, maybe. Spring break's coming up. It'll all be normal by April 15th. I don't think anybody, medical, non-medical, whatever, thought this was going to be a 7, 8, 9 month, 12 month, who knows, thing. Yeah, it's really interesting. The last question for you. Your business, who would you say your, can you share a success story? Is there a case study or sort of a testimonial you want to share of somebody you worked with who maybe the audience can relate to particularly, and you took them from point A to point B, through your work?
Yeah, so I have two examples that are really coming to mind. One of which I think relates more so. So we'll start there. So I had a client a few years ago who was a professor and leader at a local university, big deal university.
Mm-hmm.
And she not only managed a big team, she had to do research for the university, and she was working with hundreds of students. And she had a high stress job. And in addition to that, she had family. And so she was constantly, there was always a reason for her to be stressed. And she was, for the most part. to the
Mm-hmm.
point where she would get so overwhelmed by the to-do list, so overwhelmed by her responsibilities that she would become basically the world's most leader, indecisive and exhausted leader, right? And so she would end up in meetings and situations where she couldn't prioritize. She couldn't say what needed to be done first, what needed to be handed off. The thought of grading paper, hundreds of papers, just made her brain want to explode. And for her, that all of that work stress ended up coming home. And it was when one thing went wrong, she was snapping at her loved ones. Had nothing to do with them. Yes, they probably were being a little bit annoying, but right, it was just the straw that broke the camel's back.
Classic
And in
projection.
right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So in our work together, she worked through this 7-step methodology. She realized that one, she needed to implement creative stress reduction to get out of indecisive mode so that she didn't exhaust herself. And when she did, then we moved into the 7-step methodology. And then she was able to say, okay, I'm going to sit down. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. You're going to do this. I'm going to focus on this. These are my priorities. She was able to move through her day with ease and grace. And then she was able to come home and be truly present for her family. There was no projection. There was no outlash of discomfort feeling from the day before or the previous day. It was just ease. It was just connection. Their hard stuff came up, but she was able to shift in the moment and rise to the occasion.
Wow. Is that a month, 6 months, a year? Is there? I know it's hard to put a clock on it, but this probably took a little bit of time, right?
Yeah. So for her, it was in the 6 to 12 month range. There was a lot of shifting that needed to happen. There was
Mm-hmm.
a lot of blocks that needed to be identified so that she could change her actions. But yeah, so all of my clients work with me for a minimum of 12 months because it's not just one thing that's causing all of our stress, as much as we all wish it was that way. That if we just handled this one thing, if we made more money, if we got better grades, if we whatever,
Right.
there's
Right.
so much more. And so it was really over that 6 to 12 month time frame that those big shifts started to happen for her.
Powerful. All right. I know you said you got two. You got one really fast because we're coming up against our deadline here.
Yeah. So the other one, the other ones I'll just share really quickly. It's a little bit more extreme, but I had a client come to me about a year ago who had, she had tried everything by normal standards. She had been to therapy. She had been to a psychiatrist. She was taking medications. She was learning about meditation. She was trying to exercise. I mean, she had tried everything. And in the past, she had found herself in the hospital for different suicidal thoughts and things like that. I mean, this is a more extreme example. And she came to me as a last ditch effort. Like, I can't get that. I need something. Something needs to change. I'm struggling. And the doctors aren't helping anymore. The therapists aren't helping anymore. They're on my team. I'm not letting go of them, but they're not working. And within just 6 months of working together, I have to tell you, the first step was the most powerful for her. Because she realized that her relationships were causing so much stress in her life. She was trying to control the uncontrollable, aka other people. And when she realized, she was able to hand this off to a higher power, whatever that meant for her. And she was able to identify what was causing that urge within her, in addition to all of the other blocks. She was able to not only there's so much change in her. I'm like, which example do I share? Well, let me share that she was in a toxic relationship before. She left the toxic relationship. She's in a healthy relationship now. She was able to get a $15,000 bonus, not bonus, pay grade raise every year, in addition to another, I think, 5 to 10 grand bonus. And she's been stable on her medications. Her therapist was even shocked at the progress that she's been making. And she said to me for the first time a few months ago, she said, I don't know where I would be without this work. I actually, for the first time in my life, in a long time, actually feel content. And I think that is the power of the work that I do, of getting, that's the power of really getting to the root of the stress and not just putting a Band-Aid on it.
Right, which is the key. And look, and it's obvious, and I really appreciate you sharing this so candidly, how invested you are in your people, emotionally and all that. So I thank you for that. Oh, okay. Carlee Myers, DAIS. What does that stand for?
Diplomat of the American
Darn
Institute.
something. Intelligent person. What's it stand for? Sorry.
Diplomat of the American Institute of Stress.
Oh, look at you, American Institute of Stress. Good stress. Good stress.
Good stress.
Steve Green with Carlee Myers, stresslesscode.com. This is Education Live Thursday. Every Thursday night, I'm trying to bring you people, experts, anybody who can help parents, kids, adults, children, doesn't matter, manage your academics, whether it's the stress or it's the academics, all the different things we have to deal with. You know what? I got to be honest. I forget who the guest is next week. So let me kind of cheat and look that up. Let's try to find me. Okay,
roll.
next. Yeah, no, I got so into your story. I got to be really honest. I was really drawn in. It was super powerful. Next week, Samantha Feynman, an expert in executive functioning. One of the guest speakers on the back to school workshop, which was at least based on the feedback, really great. And I appreciate everybody's feedback. But Samantha has a lot to bring to the table as well. Carlee has really shared a lot of stuff. I'd suggest get with her, take her up on her offer to have a conversation. I may too. I'm getting beklempt here. What isn't that the word? So, but anyway, I think if we can summarize this, I'm going to go out a little bit and say it's an individual person's responsibility to take responsibility for their health, right? I had Hallie Steinberg on recently, and it's the same thing. We're talking about diet, not diet like you can't ever eat a candy bar, but it's about a responsibility. It's just acknowledging that you need to take responsibility for your own self-care within moderation and reason and things that you can control. So I think a little bit is that here. Some people have extreme things that get beyond their control, and I think that's what you're addressing as well, and that's where it's tough. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to take a deep breath in, breathe out a little bit longer, and we're here every Thursday night. If you want to check this out on the replay, makethegrade.education. I'll throw it in there. Thursday Night Live is, as always, sponsored by the Success Community, which is makethegrade.community. Where's the banner for that here? I can't find it, so I'm going to, just leave whatever's up there. One last time, Carlee, thank you so much. I hope you will continue to contribute into the community and be a voice of reason and tremendous advice there. So I'm going to cut this off here. Let's get the theme music going. Again, how about a big hand for Carlee? Yeah, she got a double applause today. Taking care of the twins. That was big, too. I didn't forget it on that one. Here we go. So Education Live Thursday. Steve Green, my special guest, Carlee Myers. We will see you next time.